What are you doing? Eh? All right. Okay, welcome. Mr. Deep here for another video. I have a friend who's come to join me, and so I'm not sure the dog's name, but very cute. Okay, let me just untie the, let's try that. Okay, I go, like this. Okay, hi folks, welcome. This is Mr. Deep with another video. This one is called If Reality is a Simulation, Who Created It? There's a prominent professor who's on the internet, TV, etc., James Gates, a physicist, and he asked the question, how could we discover whether we live inside a matrix? And he says we need to try to detect code in the physical laws. And what he's saying is if you look into string theory, what they found is in fact, in the equations, they found what is computer code. There's another fella who's doing the rounds, Nick Bostrom from the Oxford University, and he theorizes a few things, but one of those things is that essentially species in general do not reach what I would say technological maturity. In other words, some collapse, like us kind of now. Something happens to stop where we're about to go to in terms of the singularity, etc. The other idea or theory from Bostrom is that species in the universe do reach technological maturity. Therefore, they may or may not be creating simulated realities from the future. In broad terms, in regards to today, things like the D-Wave or the quantum computers can or could simulate worlds or universes. That's kind of where the technology is or is going. So we have to ask the question, when we reach that point, will we also become gods of our created simulated worlds? We also have to consider whether we are in someone else's simulation, or we could consider whether the simulation that we're in right now is from us in the future. And one thing to consider is that if you are in the habit of creating these simulated universes, you can then inject your own creator story, your own God, make your religion correct, etc., etc. There could also be unlimited simulations. When I think of unlimited simulations, I sort of think of the parallel universe principle. And that brings us to that question, which I think is important. If we're in a simulation, are we real? And this is really important because one thing with all of this simulation theory is that it could lead to a sort of nihilism or a sense of meaninglessness, because if we're just a simulation, then we're kind of not real. If we consider some of Wes Penray's work, he states that there's two types of universes. The first is metaphorically computer-like, but comes about through spirit and created also by thought. So what he's saying is that you could give the true universe, or this particular universe, you could use an analogy to say that it's computer-like, but in essence, and how it manifests as a universe is not a computer simulation. Then he says the second universe, which is pretty much the one we're in, is technological by nature. It is a computer matrix, and it is our universe. But what he says is that the universe we perceive is only 4%. The 96% is closed off to us. But what I think Wes Penray is also saying is that it's a mix. So it's a simulation, but there are some aspects to it, I guess the 4%, that are genuine, universal or true non-simulated universal aspects to it. And furthermore, I've talked about this in other videos, that our ancient history talks about a modification of man, a manipulation genetically of man. And I wonder whether such a downgraded or genetic manipulation could lead us to accept or experience this watered down or 4% universe. Wes Penray also sort of says that the second universe that we're in is Maya, it's illusion, And the architect is an amazing genius, but essentially an imposter, and is claiming through all the religions to be God, but really is the one that has turned their back on the original creator and has tried to spawn his own universe. So this architect of our universe claims supremacy, but has stolen it from a true, perhaps feminine, spirit creator. And this architect is author of our many religious themes. This architect, according to Wes Penray, also appears as thousands of gods, but through his study of syncretism, it's just a handful of players and his minions, his army force. Also, in terms of our ancient or sacred texts, Wes Penray puts forward the idea that there's divinity in it. And look, there's divinity in all religions and spiritual paths. That is not in question. It's the mixing of the divine with the anti-divine, and it's the plagiarizing of genuinely divine principles by an imposter, architect, creator, God, Enki, Lucifer, etc. And look, an easy way to detect an imposter God is imposter God always requires worship. And worship is psychic energy that feeds these imposters, including the architect. But the true divine creator doesn't require any type of worship. So what I'm suggesting is that, yes, I think we are in a simulation, but part of us is not simulated. And that part of us, in fact, is our fire essence, our divine DNA that connects us to the Spirit Mother who sits outside of this simulated universe, and yet we carry the seed of that truth and that reality and ability to reconnect with that mother. And essentially this whole simulation, this whole universe, and the master and all of his various forms and teachings and pathways all seek to keep the DNA deactivated, to keep a man asleep, or to, and this is the big part, to get a man to imagine he's awakened when he's still asleep. And like Wes Penray, I think the spirit fire and the DNA are connected. So essentially, I think we are children of a removed God, now replaced. And it's time to essentially learn how to activate that DNA code, the divine code. Thanks for your attention.